Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome into our second session with Standards Australia in partnership with the National AI Centre. Today, we're here to talk about AI concepts, terminology, and the AI lifecycle and how those standards fit into the broader landscape of standards for artificial intelligence and how these things can help businesses, industry, and government responsibly implement AI solutions as we emerge into a new era of technology. My name is Matthew Payne, and I am a Senior Project Manager with Standards Australia. And my role is to work directly with our technical committees where we are developing these standards across a wide range of sectors for Australia's benefit. Before we continue any further, I do want to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land from which I am reporting from today. And in my case, it is the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I'd also like to acknowledge the country and the traditional custodians of the lands from which you are joining this session from all around the country today, and pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. I'm going to bring in a representative from the National AI Centre, Rita Arrigo, to please say hello and welcome.
Hello and welcome to everyone joining us today for our second Standards Australia AI Concepts, Terminology and AI Lifecycle. We're completely honoured to be doing this event today and to be sharing with you via the Responsible AI Network this very important content that will make a significant difference to your AI projects. So you've got a great lineup, and I'd like to just let you know that we will be doing some polls throughout this event, throughout this webinar as well. We will be sharing a survey. Your opinion is very, very important. So if you'd like to let us know what you think, we would really appreciate that. And we also want your questions, because we're planning a podcast after this with answers for all the questions that you provide. So keep those questions coming, and I hope you enjoy the agenda we have ready for you.
Thank you so much, Rita. So briefly just sharing what we're going to discuss today. So as Rita mentioned, we do have a couple of polls that will go throughout the session, because we want more information about what you want to know so we can deliver solutions and workshops that are tailored to the needs of our audience and of the industry. So please take part in our polls as they go through. There is a function in the WebEx platform that you're viewing from today to participate in those polls. There's also a chat function and a section for you to submit questions in the WebEx platform. So please engage with one another and ask questions as we progress through our topics today. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about concepts and terminology and a framework for machine learning. This is a very important standard in the whole landscape of AI standards, and we'll have some speakers talk to that today. We're going to talk about the life cycle of an AI system and governance of AI and how that fits in with everything else. Finally, we'll pause for some questions from the audience at the end of the session, so please put in questions as we go through. So firstly, before we progress any further, the first question that we want to poll is, what is your level of engagement with standards? And now this kind of question is important because it will inform us of what we need to work on in future sessions and how we can tailor our solutions to our audience better. So please take part in that as we go through the session today. And one final thing from me before I bring in our speakers is I just want to talk briefly about the types of standards that exist in the international realm, specifically as an ISO deliverable. Some of these are standards that are types of specifications that we'll be talking about today, so it's important to understand what the differences are of these documents.
This meeting is being recorded.
International standards, which is the top level of deliverables. These are where we set out the rules and guidelines for specific activities or to achieve certain results. They can come in several forms. They could come as a test method, a code of practice, or guidelines, and also as a management system, which is something that we will be releasing in the not so distant future for AI. The second one is a technical specification. Now, this is generally a pathway to an international standard, and it represents where there might still be some technical work that's underway, but it provides a solution for industry to adopt immediately while the technology develops and furthers into an international standard. And finally, a technical report is more of an informative publication where we can provide data or inform positions about given subjects that helps inform the development of future deliverables within the standards landscape. So, but enough from me now. I'm going to bring in our first speakers to talk about AI concepts and terminology and a framework for AI machine learning. I would like to bring in Dr. Rosalind Wang, who is a senior lecturer at Western Sydney University, and Dr. Ian Oppermann, who is the New South Wales Chief Data Scientist and an industry professor at University of Technology, Sydney. Rosalind.
Thank you, Matt. Welcome, everybody. So I'm going to talk about the two big standards. These are what we call the horizontal delivery projects. These are both international standards documents. So as Matt said, these are documents that's top-level documents. They are intended to be followed by organizations to ensure quality and safety and or other desired characteristics of the products that you're developing. And also one last thing to say is these are consensus-based documents. So the two documents, and the reason these two documents are important and we do it first is because these provides all the definitions and terminologies for all other documents within the ISO artificial intelligence documents. So everything that is defined within these two documents or other documents has to follow. So these two documents, 22989, that's the most fundamental documents here that it establishes terminology for AI in general, and 23053 describes the AI system that is specifically for machine learning, that uses machine learning as a background. So next slide, please. So the first document that we'll be talking about is 22989. It's the title is Artificial Intelligence Concepts and Terminology, and as I said, it established all the terminology for AI and describes the concepts in the field of AI. So the document, this can be used as a development for other standards and in support of communications among other parties and stakeholders that uses AI. It's applicable for all types of organizations, whether you are a commercial enterprise or a government agency or a not-for-profit organization. There's a lot in this document. We start with terms and definitions. So the really simple ones: what is AI? What is data? What is machine learning? What is trustworthiness? You know, all of these sort of terms that's AI related or machine learning related. Then the document will, sorry, Matt, go back one slide. Thank you. Then the document will talk about AI concepts. So what that means is, because we have all sorts of different types of AI systems and AI concepts, for example, and not just machine learning, even though machine learning is one of the most, I'll say, popular type of AI at the moment. But we have agent systems or multi-agent systems. We have things like semantic computing, soft computing. We have things like Internet of Things, or automations in anything like factory manufacturing processes, for example. So these are all different type of AI systems and AI concepts. And then the document talks about AI system life cycles, and this starts the information, the description about AI system life cycle, and this is continued in the specific document that we'll talk about next on AI system life cycles. And then there's the AI system functional overviews. There's also talking about AI ecosystems. Then there's one other thing is the fields of AI. So for example, we got vision systems, we got natural language, we got things like, for example, data mining. And then and finally the document finishes with the various applications of AI. So next slide, please. And the second document that is in this group is the 23053. These numbers are really quite long. And this is the framework for AI systems using machine learning. So this is specifically machine learning related AI systems. And again, it's applicable to all types of organizations. And this document will again start with terms or definitions. But in this case, it's machine learning specific definitions, and which is not defined in the previous document 22989. So for example, machine learning models, machine learning tools, and data specific to machine learning. So anything that is machine learning related but is also AI related, those are terms that's already defined in 22989, and this document just references the document in 22989. And there are three main sections in this document, which is machine learning systems, for example, machine learning task, models and tools, and then we have machine learning approaches. So for example, things like transfer learning, classification, regression, and all that type of machine learning approaches. And then there's a big section on machine learning pipelines. So from getting your data all the way to implementing the machine learning system. And finally, we end up with some examples. So that's all the slides for this section. Ian, if you have any additional things you want to add?
I think you've done that very well. Thanks, Rosalind. I'm quite happy with that.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you so much, Rosalind. It's really a great overview of these important standards, and they seem to be quite foundational standards to the standards landscape. And one thing that I just want to dive into a little bit deeper is you mentioned that these are consensus documents. And what does consensus document mean in the international standards development landscape?
Yes, so the ISO committee for artificial intelligence comprises all the different national bodies from the different, I believe, members of this particular committee. So when it comes to consensus, then that means each national body, each nation has one vote for a for or against of this any documents. And so in this case, if it's so we don't have you know, say 10, because we have, if we have 10 people from the United States and 1 person from Japan come at a meeting to vote on a document, it's still it's still 2 different votes, and not 10 from the US and 1 from Japan. So it's just 1 nation, 1 vote.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, Rosalind. And I just want to respond to a question that was asked in the chat recently about if these standards are available now and if they've been published. And I just want to confirm that, yes, they have been published, and we do have Australian adopted versions of these standards available for businesses to adopt and implement within their organizations. So I'm going to move on to the next poll now, but before I do that, I just want to recap on what the results were from the first poll that we got, and so asking about your level of engagement with standards. And this is a really important metric for us, so thank you for those that participated. And at the moment, it's quite split between getting started, a beginner or moderate knowledge, with 37, 30 and 27%. So thank you very much for participating in that poll. And I'm now going to ask you to participate in a second poll, which is, are you developing AI systems? Do you have systems that you've implemented in your business right now, or are they under development? This is a really important piece for us because it will give us an idea of what everyone's up to and how we can shape our solutions moving forward. So moving on to our second topic today, we're going to talk about the life cycle of AI. Now, I'm going to bring in Dr. Ian Oppermann to lead the conversation. Ian, over to you.
Thanks very much, Matthew, and thanks very much, Rosalind, for opening up. I'm joining you today from the lands of the Wiradjuri people. AI has elements of technology which are unique, but AI is a data-driven tool, data-driven system, and typically implemented in software. So when we're thinking about AI from a life cycle perspective, we need to think about it as software which is being developed typically in an agile, iterative fashion and being fed with data, and it adapts. So there are a couple of things about AI which really are different to every other technology. We can say that it amplifies things, it accelerates things, and that's typical of digital systems, but it also adapts. And that adaptation is really what makes AI different from most other technologies. What I thought I'd do for this section was just talk a little bit about what the OECD perspective is. So the Organisation of Economic Cooperation and Development Organisations. I just messed that up, I'm sorry. The Organisation of Economic Cooperation and Development. So a group of countries have developed a view of what AI looks like from a structural perspective, from a process perspective, to try and help us think our way into the issues that we need to care about. And those issues relate to not only what we're doing from a governance and management of risk, so define, assess, treat, but also representing the different phases in the life cycle of AI from the perspective of a project. We plan, design, we collect and process data, we build and use, and we model, we verify, we deploy, and then we operate and monitor. And that monitoring relates to the adaptive nature of AI. But we're also looking at it from the perspective of risks, and risks to the principles of AI, those trustworthiness principles that Rosalind touched on right at the beginning, are things around benefit of people and planet, human-centered values and fairness, transparency and explainability, robustness, security and safety, and accountability. All of those different streams, those different swim lanes, need to be considered when we're developing and deploying AI. This view is a structural perspective. The next slide, Matthew, if you could just move on, is a more of a functional perspective where these 3 different layers interact with each other, govern, manage risks throughout the AI lifecycle, where we look constantly at not only what we're doing from the software and data perspective, but also increasingly think about what the AI is doing as it operates. Because it adapts, because it accelerates, because it amplifies, we need to think about those threats and that governance issue throughout the life cycle. Next slide, please. Now that's an OECD perspective. This is now when we start to get to the standards perspective. And of course, if we are using standards which are developed by ISO, the International Standards Organization, or IEC, the International Electrotechnical Commission, jointly those standards must line up with OECD principles. in order for them to be able to operate within that principled framework. One of the things I really encourage people to do, especially those folks who are beginners who feel a little bit daunted about engaging with standards, is pick one up and read it and have a look at what's in it. There are very good structured ways of thinking about all those different elements through the life cycle. Here is the standards version of what we just saw from the OECD perspective. So inception, design, development, verification, validation, deployment, operation and monitoring, continuous validation, reevaluation, retirement. That's the life cycle of AI. But we know that if there's an agile element to development, if there's an iterative approach to how we bring this to life and then deploy, and there's ongoing monitoring, that there are many different cycles that need to line up. DevOps, looking at issues of traceability, transparency, explainability, security and privacy, absolutely in today's world, risk management from what it does, and also governance. This diagram is taken directly from the standard we're talking about, ISO IEC DIS, which means Draft International Standard, 5338, which relates to the two standards that Rosalind was talking about a moment ago. Next slide, please. And because we're talking about data-driven tools made of software, they also need to line up with other standards areas. So here we've got a couple of standards which are actually jointly between ISO, International Standards Organization, IEC, International Electrotechnical Commission, and the IEEE, the Institute for Electrical and Electronic Engineers. Joint standards around software life cycles, joint standards around system life cycles, and then those which are specific to the AI life cycle. Of course, any new AI standard needs to fit in with these other large system standards. Next slide, please. So this is the view of the life cycle. Now, again, this is taken directly from the standard, and the intention is not to say this is the way you must think about the AI life cycle, but tries to focus on the major functional elements: that inception, design, development, verification, validation, deployment, operation, monitoring, and then continuous validation, continuous reevaluation, and then retirement. This is a good functional model.
Oh, I think we may have lost Ian there. Just going to wait a moment to see if he rejoins before.
Here we go.
I'm back.
He's back.
Thank you, Ian.
That was a satellite issue, I'm sorry. We do have standards for satellites, but let's stay focused on this. So what gives you is just a practical way to think your way into how you're going to.
I think your connection, Ian, if you can hear me, is still not very good. So
I'm back again. Next
okay,
slide, please.
Sorry, mate.
And I think this is my last one. So again, thinking about the AI system lifecycle, there are some elements which are generic, related to software, such as those joint standards with ISO, IEC, IEEE, some which have been modified specifically for AI, and some which are genuinely specific to AI technology, given that adaptation, amplification, and acceleration. So there's a lot in this very busy slide. Again, this is something taken from 5338, but it helps to position AI as a software-driven, data-driven tool in the context of broader software systems. Next slide. I think that's then done.
That was it for you, Ian. So thank you very much. But before I let you step down, I wanted to ask a question that came through in the chat, and it is about the uptake of standards. So are we seeing industry by way of business or government, different vendors applying or referring to these standards? Do you have any experience with the application of them in any kind of sense?
Matthew, that's a wonderful question. Thank you for asking. Increasingly, organizations are picking up the standards. There's been a lot of reinvention. Again and again and again, systems have been reinvented. And now that these standards are available, they talk about systems and life cycles and fundamentals, such as Rosalind was just talking about now, more and more organizations are picking them up and starting to use them. And I'm delighted to say even government is doing that. It prevents reinvention. It prevents trying to rediscover how to do it. And it just gives you the framework to start to use straight away. And the terminology, believe it or not, is absolutely fundamental. There are not enough words in the English language to describe all the concepts that we are dealing with AI. And there's such reuse of terms that getting very specific about what we mean and what we don't mean is extraordinarily helpful. It gives us firm ground to walk on.
Thank you very much, Ian, and thank you for your presentation. I'm going to bring in two new guest speakers for us today who are going to talk about the governance of IT, a governance implication of the use of artificial intelligence by organisation. So I would like to welcome Jeff Clark, who is a representative of the Australian Industry Association on our technical committee, IT 43, and also to Dr. Ali Akbari, who is a representative of the Australian Institute of Company of Directors. Welcome, Ali, and Jeff, over to you.
Great, thanks, Matt. So today we are talking about the governance implications of the use of AI by organisations. And this is, as you can see, it's the perspective of an organisation. So an organisation could be a small company, government department, or a larger company or part thereof. So to clarify the difference between governance and management, I'm just going to illustrate this using this little map here to show you, what I mean by the difference between governance and management. So we can think of this channel, if you like, as the environment in which the organisation operates. And in our little metaphor here, the organisation is this ship. Now, governance has a number of jobs. The first is to understand the organisation and the context in which it operates, which is what you're seeing here. And then they need to set the purpose and the direction of the organisation. So in this little example, the organisation sort of wants to get to here. But they also need to understand and set stakeholder expectations. So working with their stakeholders, and by stakeholders I mean employees, customers, owners, regulators, and so on, they need to understand the parameters in which the organisation is operating. So these parameters could be things like risk appetite, so they decide how much risk the organisation is willing to take on and what kind of risk. They might set parameters around behaviours, so understanding what stakeholders want, they would then describe that as their social responsibilities, the culture within the organisation, the ethics that they're going to adopt, and so on. They might set parameters around the resources they're wanting to use, or acquire to reach their goals. And then they might have other parameters around how they expect the organisation to grow, like through mergers or acquisitions, grow organically, or a mixture of those kind of things. There will be many of these kind of parameters. The other side of it is management, and you can think of management as kind of the engine room of this ship. So their job is to efficiently fulfill the objectives of the organisation, staying within these parameters, including risk, appetite, resources, and so on, and then report progress towards the objectives. So in this way, we have the governance side of the house looking at the organisation and its context, understanding and setting stakeholder expectations, setting purpose, direction, parameters, and remaining accountable to the organisation. Management then is about efficiently fulfilling the organisation's objectives and remaining within those parameters and reporting on progress. The common language here then is policy. Now, policy is really the enumeration, if you like, of the decisions of the organisation, and this occurs at all levels, from the governance level down to operations. And increasingly, we're seeing policies being described and then automatically implemented through systems. So it's very important to get this policy right. And of course, the other channel between these two is reporting mechanisms. So it's very important to understand the differences between these two things, and not do governance when you're supposed to be doing management and vice versa. For example, management does risk management. They don't do risk appetite, but they could ask the governance or the governing body to consider changing the risk appetite or any other of these parameters. As long as you know the difference, that's very important. So the clarity of the roles and responsibilities between governance and management is critical, particularly in emerging technologies like AI. So that brings us to this standard, the governance implications of the use of AI by organisations. It provides guidance for the governing body. So that might be board of directors or whatever your governing body is called. or is, if the organization is considering or using AI. It refers to other standards, both in the governance world and in AI. So it's actually a pretty good overview of all the standards in SC42 because it gives sort of a high-level perspective on all of that. But it also takes the perspective that AI is like any other tool, whether it's a crane or a truck or whatever. It brings new opportunities to the organization, new risks, and new responsibilities for the governing body. And so the standard is really talking about, what are these opportunities, risks, and responsibilities, and how should the organization approach dealing with them? It starts with a focus on policies, like I sort of highlighted in that first slide. The organization's purpose, ethics, and other guidelines are reflected through its policies, whether they're explicit or implicit. And one of the things you'll see in the standard is that it's really saying you need to get more explicit on these policies because AI needs those policies to operate efficiently and responsibly. And of course, the operational aspects are affected through management. So you're probably asking, why is it 38507? You might not be given all the numbers thrown around today, but I just thought that I would point out that this is actually a joint working group, JWG, between the AI subcommittee, SC42, and the Governance of IT Committee, SC40. So bringing these two together was quite a fruitful exercise. What I'm showing here is a series of standards around governance of IT called 38500 series. And you'll know there's quite a few here, but down the bottom here we have 38507, which is administered by SC42. In 38500, the Governance of IT standard, they have this diagram, and this shows kind of a different perspective of that boat picture I had, where we have stakeholder expectations, we have business pressures, we have all these sorts of things. And the governing body looks at all that, evaluates what they should be doing, creates policies and directs those policies throughout the organization, and then monitors progress. And of course, manages, the management system implements those policies and reaches those objectives. So we'll see this diagram come up a bit when Ali gets to that piece. So with that, I will hand over to Ali.
Thank you, Jeff. So to give a high-level overview of this specific standard, 38507 is structured as like 4 main sections. It starts with a high-level governance implications of the organizational use of AI. Then it goes to an overview of AI and AI systems. The third section is basically some guidelines about how to create policies to address the use of AI in the organization. And then finally, an annex with a quick overview of governance and all of the related standards. Thank you. So basically, as Jeff mentioned, this is a joint working group. And when it comes to referencing all of the relevant standards, on the left side, you see an example of those which are more towards the governance side. And on the right side is a few examples of all of those AI standards that are already referenced within this standard, as well as considering all of the dynamics and the rapid progress in the AI standardization. There are many ongoing projects that will end up with additional new standards which will be published, and hopefully in the next versions and reviews and updates of this one, those standards will be referenced as well. Next, please. In the first section, the governance implications, basically this standards trying to avoid reinventing the wheel. The approach and the lens to it is AI is yet another new tool, therefore the same governance rules apply. So for the governing body, basically they still remain accountable for the activities that happens within the organization, and also they have the obligation to understand and consider all of the implications that are introduced through use of this new technology and its specific characterization. This standard also warns some of the new implications of AI systems, which actually will help the governing body to better understand how they need to update their policies. It includes, for example, the over-reliance on technologies such as AI and when we are introducing automation to the organization, as well as new complications and complexities. For example, when you are replacing humans with AI automated processes, then there is expectation around transparency and explainability, which has its own specific challenges and limitations. There is lack of context, for example, when we come to AI systems, different from humans, they don't have a lot of understanding of the context around the specific problem that they are solving. As well as the speed of change is yet another interesting challenge about AI systems. Different from a lot of other technologies, as we see, there is a very rapid progress and a lot of changes introduced into this domain. So keeping up with those changes is something that needs to be considered from the governance perspective. Next one, please. The overview of AI and AI system section basically gives a high-level, board-level view of AI. This is again trying to explain what are the governing body dealing with and what are these definitions at a little bit higher level than the standards that was earlier explained by Rosalind. So there are lots of references to the specific terminology and specific definitions, but a slightly different angle to that. Then this section also highlights at least 3 main differences between AI systems and traditional IT systems, which is critical to understand, and it will change the way that the policies need to be developed. The first one is the capability for decision automation. Basically, in a lot of previous traditional IT systems, a full automation is not happening. However, AI systems, they have this capability to fully automate the whole process and make the final decision independently of humans. So there are specific considerations there. Then there is the second point, which is rather than humans explicitly coding the specific logic to solve problems, now when we are dealing with the AI and machine learning, basically we provide the data and some high-level objectives. And it's the system that comes up with the specific way and the specific logic that we will get to that objective. And last one, the capability to automatically adapt. Basically, this is a capability not necessarily happening always, but AI systems are capable of adapting themselves according to the additional observation they have during their operation. So an AI system that is implemented today, it might have a specific behavior which is not necessarily the same after a while it's used, if there is that kind of ongoing learning capability. Thanks. Next one. So what considerations are needed to help the development of policies to address the use of AI in the organization? As Jeff mentioned earlier, this diagram has a lot of similarities to the other one, which was specifically for general IT systems. Again, here you see the governing body is being influenced by external factors such as market needs and the stakeholder expectations. However, there is a new factor introduced here, which are those AI differences that I mentioned is being discussed in detail inside this standard. And of course, there are already lots of policies within the organization, but many of those need revision and specific consideration in relation to the new specification that are introduced by the AI systems. So the decision-making processes, they need to be revised. The data that is now going to be the underlying layer for these AI systems, you may need additional considerations, the culture and values of the organization, the existing compliance and what needs to be refreshed there, and also the approach to the risk and risk management now that there are AI systems with their specific characterization, what needs to be changed and updated there. And after that, all of these updated policies will be provided to the managing level in order to apply it within the organization. Next, please. So what's next after this governance implication standard? Basically, after we have the governance covered and the policies are created, the next level is the management. So there are a couple of ongoing projects such as 42001, which is looking into the AI management systems, and 42005, which will discuss about AI system impact assessment. After all of these projects are completed and they are rolled out, basically that will be a pathway towards having the first certification for the AI systems, which will be one of the things that a lot of organizations in the industry are expecting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff and Ali. That was really informative about the governance standard that we have at the moment. And I do want to ask some questions before I let you step away from the limelight. Ali, while I've still got you, I do want to ask, can you describe some examples perhaps of how AI governance can positively impact businesses?
Of course, yeah. One of the challenges that we see in the industry and in the organizations is when there is ambiguity. On one side, we don't have clear policies and governance guidelines. And then on the other side, the awareness in the industry is increasing around the responsible use of AI and potential risks that AI introduces. So what it has done is people jump into one of the extremes. Sometimes they just don't do and leverage all of the potentials of AI just because they are worried about it too much. And sometimes they just go and implement things that are risky and not necessarily aligned with the overall direction that the organization want to go, just based on assuming this is simple and it's not going to cause anything. I think when there is this sort of clear governance and policies defined around AI and AI systems, it will help to avoid any of those either risks or losing those potential opportunities.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. So as you can see, I've got another polling question for the audience on the screen, but before we go into that, I wanted to recap the results that we got from the second poll. So the question was about, are you developing an AI system? At the moment, it seems that 52% of you are not yet developing a system. 34% are beginners and starting to be interested in developing a system. 10% of you say that you have multiple systems already in flight or under development. And then 7% of you say that you have a large number of AI systems under development or in place at the moment. So thank you very much for participating in that. And we have our final poll on the screen right now, which is, does your organization have organizational policies for the use of AI? And I think this is a really interesting question to ask on the back of our governance discussion, because policy and governance obviously go hand in hand. So moving through towards the latter part of our session today, we are going to take questions from the audience. So we will work through those, but I want to give a little bit of a plug to a Dropbox that we have at Standards Australia, because we want more information from you about your use of standards, your use of AI standards. Tell us about your journey. Tell us about your pain points. Tell us what you want to see from standards. And as Rita mentioned at the beginning of our session, we are doing a podcast that will come in the following weeks after today that will continue on the discussion of some of the things that we've talked about. So if there's something you want to ask that we could address in the podcast, this is also a really good way to communicate with us. So please reach out to us at ai@standards.org.au and tell us everything that you are doing about standards or want to ask us questions about things you want to know about standards. So I'm going to get to some questions. And I just want to plug that we have a bit of a survey that will also be shared at the end of our session today. And it would be really good to understand what value you got out of today's session, and so we can better inform our future sessions. But for now, I will go and take some questions from the audience. So just give me 1 second. I lost my place. So a question from Brendan, and I'm going to put this one open to anyone that wishes to take it. And I think this is a really good question to ask. It's having an AI standard is great, but can we ensure that when organizations start to use AI, that we can trust the results being delivered are both consistent and correct? What other systems or processes will we need to be developed to ensure that consumers can trust the output from those AI systems? And this is a really great question. I'll open it to the floor. Whoever wants to tackle this one, please jump in.
Matthew, I might have a go getting started. There are so many places that you can get it wrong that without the standard, you're very, very likely to have a result that you are really unlikely to be able to trust at face value. Those issues around, have you followed the right process? Have you got data of the right quality? Is that data quality appropriate for the purpose you're going to use it for? Are all things that sort of foundational questions you need to be able to answer appropriately in order to even come within scope of being able to answer the question. Then the question is, the subsequent questions are accuracy and trust. Trust is a very, very big issue. There's a working group looking at trustworthiness of systems right at the moment, and also there's of course a group looking at trustworthiness of AI in particular, and there are a lot of elements to it, and that those conceptual frameworks are still being thought through. So the simple answer is that without following clear, repeatable, defined processes, you have little hope of being able to say definitely yes. When following these standards and processes, you at least get yourself into the region where you can start to argue and test and look at the relative performance and accuracy of your result against some hopefully predetermined target or against some evolving framework that you're looking at.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ian. The next question is...
follow up?
Absolutely. Please, Rosalind.
Yeah, just as a quick follow-up, there are a couple of standards already published on gosh, I lost my thoughts. For example, we have the classification results, what's it called? The assessment of classification performance. So that has the standard set up or the process set up to say what are the things you need to do if you have a classification system to ensure that your results are not biased. You know, what type of data you should be using, how you should interpreting your results, etc., etc. There are also various other standards that are either under development or are published that are looking into the various areas in that question.
Great, thank you very much, Rosalind. And while I still have you, perhaps you could answer the next question. So what are the kinds of things that organizations should look out for when it comes to vulnerability of data by AI systems like generative AI? Now, I would imagine in the academic industry that generative AI is a challenging thing to navigate at the moment. So what can we do to mitigate these risks?
Yeah, in academia, it's definitely a massive issue. You caught me there on that one. In terms of data, we do have a working group, WG2, which is specifically on data, on various issues in terms of how you can curate your data, how to make sure your data is not biased. But generative AI, it's such a new issue. I don't think we even have a proposed document for it yet.
Yeah, I think, well, from purely a standard perspective, there isn't still anything published, but definitely generative AI and its data hungriness and the way these large language models are being trained, they are posing a lot of new concerns and challenges. It comes, whether it's data security, whether it is privacy, whether it is the balance and imbalance of the data. There are lots of questions and concerns around the copyright and IP concerns. So all of those need specific considerations before getting to use it.
Great, thank you very much, Ali and Rosalind, for that one. A bit of a curly one, I must admit. There was a question about how standards and international legislation or legislation in general can be harmonized together. And I think I might jump in on this one because in our initial session, we did discuss a partnership that the International Artificial Intelligence Committee, which Australia is a member of course, we have actually partnered with the EU under what's called the Vienna Agreement, where we've agreed that several standards that have been developed already at the international level and already published will be adopted in the EU AI Act, and have also agreed to jointly develop new standards for specific topics that will be managed by the ISO committee, but have EU legislators involved that will appear in the EU AI Act. And it's a really great example of legislators and standards developers coming together to form one solution and acknowledging that standards are a really useful tool in applying good outcome or generating good outcomes for an emerging technology like artificial intelligence. A really good question. We're getting lots of questions come in so far. So
we've got one from Brendan about
absolutely
having AI standards is great, but can we ensure that when organizations start to use AI, that we can trust the results being delivered are both consistent and correct? What other systems processes would need to be developed to ensure consumers can trust the outputs? Maybe Ian could have a go at that one.
Yeah, sure, happy to. So what we've done in New South Wales is develop something which gives us a framework for thinking about not just AI from the data and algorithmic perspective, but also what it is that we're doing. So it's a piece of soft law, if I can put that in, let me put some air quotes around it, soft law. It's something, the assurance framework is something that was developed during 2021. It is standards based. And it talks about AI from the perspective of what it is we're doing with the AI, and in particular thinking about that amplification, acceleration, adaptation element of AI. It looks at issues around algorithms and algorithmic bias. It looks at issues around data and data bias and issues of fairness, and then tries to decompose what's being done into the different elements and then recompose after we've applied restraints or constraints and tried to identify risks and harms. And then we talk about the deployment in a piloting phase before scaling it up, and also the degree of external review that needs to take place when that AI system is deployed. It's something that not only we require New South Wales government people to apply, it's mandatory since March 2020 to apply it. But we've also been working with vendors to, if you're looking to sell a component or sell a system to New South Wales government, then we ask the vendors to also adhere to this assurance framework. And it's something that it's been out of the market now for 18 months, so since March 2022, in terms of mandatory application. And it's something that we're about to refresh now, of course, in particular in light of generative AI and large language models. But it really does help us think through the principles in our strategies, the principles in our policies, down to what are we doing at the bits level, what are we doing at the algorithm level, and where standards exist, we absolutely refer to them, and we'll update the assurance framework as standards get updated, but also as new technological capabilities arise because of new AI.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Ian. Jeff, I'm going to go to you next. And this is going to touch on something that we haven't really talked about much, but I think it's a really important point to cover off. And the question was, how will regulatory bodies monitor organizations to ensure that they're following the required policies and frameworks? And I'm going to add a little bit to the end of that question is, what about certification? How do I prove that I've been using the standards correctly?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So one of the things about standards generally is that they can extend the political requirements, I guess, in terms of legislation versus implementation, because there's a big gap between government policy and how it's implemented. So referencing standards is a great way to do that. The other side of the question is around certification, and as Ali mentioned, there's a management system standard 42001, which is getting close to publication. That will allow organizations to, if they conform to the standard, to get a third-party audit in, someone, that's appropriately approved, and there is a whole process around how that happens. And then you can certify that your organization is properly managing the responsible use of AI. That's kind of the same approach we have. Some of the audience might know 27001, for example, or 9001. These are standards around information security and equality. So both those standards get certified in the same way, so that organizations can say, we're certified for information security, we're certified for good quality management systems. They'll be able to add a third one to that, and there are many of these, by the way, but they'll be able to add a third one that says, and by the way, we're using AI responsibly. So I think those things combined will all help organizations to, hopefully display a level of trust for their stakeholders that they are implementing AI properly.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jeff. We've probably got time for one more question, I think. And Ali, maybe I'll throw this one to you. And it's a question about what are companies doing now, or what can companies do leading into the use of an AI system to educate their employees internally around policy and for AI as this technology emerges?
Thank you. Yeah, I think there is a lot to say there, probably more than this 1-2 minutes that is remaining, but definitely the trend that we see is organizations are paying more attention to this. And a good thing is the realization that the AI literacy is key there. Even if we apply all of these guidelines and guardrails and try to control everything, still the weakest link in that whole chain will be the end users, the people who are actually building, deploying, using, and leveraging all of these systems. And same as with the security and a cybersecurity challenge, if we do not solve that part, the problem can remain. So I see lots of organizations are trying to bring more of these sort of training courses or start collaborating with the external organizations that provide education or kind of micro-credentials, and try to train the people in order to make sure they are not only about they are aware not only about the technical side, but also about all of these responsible use of AI side of it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ali, and thank you to all of our guests and to all of you for attending today. That is all the time that we have for today. So one final reminder, we do have a survey and we want to hear from you, and also send us an email at ai@standards.org.au, and we'll do our best to get back to you, and please look out for the podcast that will be coming out in a few weeks. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.